Good afternoon. Hey, this is Michael here at Interstate PR. Again, from my home office. It's a casual day today, like I think almost every day has been lately. But I have another special guest with me today. I'm going to bring him on right now, Mr. Lincoln Snyder, who is the Executive Director and Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Diocese of Sacramento. Lincoln, thank you for taking some time out of your extremely busy schedule, especially now, to sit and talk with me today. So welcome.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Michael. Thank you for having me on.
So Lincoln and I have known each other for a few years, and we've worked on a few projects together, and we've been able to circumnavigate some tricky waters. But we have also developed a great relationship where we chat, usually just a few times a year, but we chat. And I wanted to have Lincoln on today because not only is he an employee at the Diocese of Sacramento and the superintendent of the school district or of the schools, he's also a parent that has kids in a school in the diocese and can give a lot of, I think, testimony to what it's been like to have that work-life balance. And also the fact that the Diocese of Sacramento, and I'm sure other dioceses, has just done a stand-up and amazing job at not missing a beat educating their children. We were just chatting before we went live about that. And Lincoln, let's just jump into that right now. I mean, you guys did an amazing job at getting kids ready to learn and getting the staff ready to teach in such a quick time. My kids found out, and we found out on March 13th that the schools were going to be closed for a period of time. I think it's a fluid situation, so nobody really knows when anything's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But then Sunday, March 15th, we were getting instruction for Monday. How did you do it?
Yeah, we got very lucky a little bit with the timing on this because, the superintendents of the state meet 3 times a year, and we happened to have our mid-year meeting the week of February 25th, I checked. And so COVID had started becoming a thing for us already at that point, knowing that there was a chance that it could spread and it could lead to things like school closures. And so we spoke about it rather conceptually. I mean, at that point, Europe was a couple, 3 weeks ahead of us, and they were already going into things like school closures, mandatory shelter-in-place orders, et cetera, et cetera. And we said, well, it could happen to us. We should be ready for it. So we spent a 2-day retreat getting organized just very conceptually. And luckily, we have a curriculum committee that has a lot of really hardworking and ambitious people that put together a protocol for the state of California, and they started working on it that week, the 26th of February, and fleshed out a protocol that had all of these different ideas for how we could get online and go to distance learning as quickly as possible. And we made a few, I think, really prudent strategic decisions right up front to make our lives easy around it. We have one information system for the whole diocese called School Speak, and it has the ability to push out homework and assignments. And said, okay, we've already got it. Even if schools aren't using it yet, that's the one we're going to use. We also decided to stick with Google, the Google Ed suite, because most of our schools use Google for email and other things. And the Google Hangouts is freely available, and it's accessible on pretty much any device, including a flip phone. Even if you don't have the ability to see a screen, you can still dial into a number. So we simply decided we're going to go with the technology that we've got. And our mantra for that week and a half was developed everything was don't let better be the enemy of good. We wanted to make sure that we were focusing on accessibility and speed and getting up and running. We had our academic decathlon on Saturday, I believe it was the 7th of March. I'll check my calendar here, at Jesuit High School. And so we were all together as a school's team the day that Elk Grove Unified announced they were going to be closing for the week. And so if you'll recall, Elk Grove Unified, which is the biggest public district in Northern California, decided to close essentially when it ended up being a week ahead of everyone else. So when that happened, I happened to be, again, in the same place as, in this case, all of our principals. And so we met and said, okay, Elk Grove has gone live with this closure. They've made a decision. We have to presume the same thing could happen to us. And so you have this week to get ready. And we worked nonstop from that Saturday straight through to the 13th, that Friday, of me pushing out memos, us collaborating on resources, making decisions about what we're going to use. And on Thursday, I put out a memo saying, okay, not sure it's going to happen yet, but be ready tomorrow to send your students and teachers home with everything they need, just in case we can't come back to school on Monday. And so Friday morning, our teachers were prepared to have everything bundled up and sent home. Sure enough, on Friday, the counties made their decisions, and we ended up announcing at the time what we believed to be a temporary closure. So that was the story of the turnaround. And again, I was just very lucky to be in the room with decision makers at a couple of really important junctures. Everybody decided that, yes, we are going to make a decision. We are going to be ready. Better's not going to be the enemy of good. It's not going to be a perfect rollout, but we're going to roll out quickly. And we're just deciding to make this happen. So I think that's a lot of the reason that we were so much faster than perhaps some other organizations with the turnaround.
Well, I mean, on these videos, I've probably done 10 of them now. I keep touting how well the Diocese of Sacramento and the schools have done. Like I said at the top of this, that the kids haven't missed a beat. I mean, they really haven't. My kids are actually doing schoolwork right now. They're probably getting 4 to 6 hours, depending on the grade level that they're in, of work to do. And I'm sure kids who are older than mine are maybe getting more work to do. And it's just, you guys have done a great job. Really, really good job. The communication has been clear, as much as it can be during this time. And maybe that's something we can roll into here, is that, your job as a superintendent oftentimes is working with the schools, but now you're working with health organizations and all these different government entities who usually have nothing to do with the Catholic schools, because they don't really have any governance over the Catholic schools. How has that been? And what's the transition been like? And is it keeping you even busier than normal because of that?
It is. And so, my communication role really is on both ends. I have, of course, my duty to the principals and to the community directly. And so I was getting 250 emails a day, if I had to guess, when we were in the first few weeks of this. It slowed down probably to 100 to 150 right now. But I had to be communicating laterally with my fellow superintendents up to the bishop and my school boards. We have 3 school districts within the diocese, each with its own board, as well as the county authorities. So I've had a lot of emails that have been CC all, which I know is normally really bad practice, but open and quick communication really has been the need of the day, for sure. Our policy is to follow the directives of public health. So just because a public district closes doesn't mean that we have to, because they have other challenges or other interests than we do. They're working with collective bargaining units, and we're not. They're dealing with some laws about accessibility that don't apply to us. And so I think that made us a little bit more flexible. But for example, when I announced that we had made the decision to stay closed and in distance learning mode for the rest of the school year, so our campuses are closed and our kids are learning online, we committed to do that through the end of the year. I talked to 6 county directors of public health that day to make that choice. So we are very much following a county by county policy, and it takes a lot of working the phone to make sure I'm in front of the decision makers to actually get them to committing to a decision. So it's been different. They're not used to talking like you said, Catholic school superintendents.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point that I think a lot of people may miss, because they focus on what's in front of them, right? The Diocese of Sacramento covers 6 different counties, right?
Actually, so we cover 21 counties as a diocese.
Okay, yeah.
We have our schools in 10 of them. And most of our population, say 90% of our school population, is going to be in 6 counties.
That's still a huge area that you have to cover.
Yep.
And to be in contact with not only school-wise, but these public health officials and what's going on. I mean, people, I think, don't realize this, especially with like the teachers and the principals, and you've got to be the same way. I like to use this analogy that you guys are kind of calm on the top like a duck, but your feet are pedaling like mad under the water. And what have you seen? I'm sure you're probably having a little more interaction right now with some of the teachers than you normally do, right? What are you seeing on them? And maybe for the parents who are watching, what are some of the things that you can give advice to help those teachers out right now? Because a lot of them are learning this process as they go along. They're learning on the fly as parents, and kids are learning on the fly too. Maybe just from your 30,000-foot perspective, what can a parent do to help out their child's teacher during this time right now?
Yeah, we are ministers first. And so all of my communication with the teachers, and I've really emphasized that please remember that our first and foremost duty is to minister to these kids. I mean, we're there to nourish their souls, and we're going to make them academically excellent. That's part of our mission. But really, we're ministers first, and we're witnessing to them first. And so to always approach all of our interactions right now with the kids and with the parents in that role. I put together a document that realigned our learning objectives, and each school has its learning objectives that it expresses in a unique way. But I said for all of us for the rest of this year, we're talking about three things, which is faith, community, and growth. The faith part, again, is that we are grateful for this day that the Lord has made, regardless of what slings and arrows may be thrown at us. We're grateful for the moment, and we're ministering to each other. The community piece is understanding that our main objective with distance learning is not just to dump facts into these little people's minds, but rather keep them in community with each other despite this challenge. I mean, it's a big, scary world. And I can only imagine when you're a little person with all of this anxiety around you, that I'm sure that rubs off. And we have to be sure that the kids understand that we're in community with them, and we want them to be in community with each other so they don't feel isolated. And finally, that growth piece. Of course, faith and community are the most important, but we are delivering novel instruction when we were moving the kids forward in the program, despite this closure, which not everybody's able to do that right now. And so we are, that is how we're expressing our excellence right now as a Catholic system, is we are moving the needle, and we're focused on next year and having our kids prepared for graduation or promotion to the next grade. And really understanding that I had a diagram I drew for the principals during a training, where I drew a triangle with those 3 points. And I said, we want to be somewhere in the triangle. And of course, at different times, you have to emphasize different things. But you always have to remember that we're triangulating between those 3 goals. Stay inside the triangle. So what could parents do? I'm just grateful for the patience. I mean, when we jumped into this, we knew we weren't going to be perfect. We know that on the first week, a lot of our teachers maybe assigned too much work, or they had problems with the tech. Everybody had their own learning curve. And my hope was just that as we were vulnerable about this being new for us and us trying something new in service to these kids, that the parents would give us the benefit of the doubt at the beginning as we've learned. And of course, we're still doing professional development. We're still learning. We're really working hard to bring our A game. But for the most part, we were very gracious with us as we had to figure out a new game very quickly, as have they. I mean, we know that it's not easy on a lot of families to have everybody under the same roof all the time, every day for months on end, and competing for devices, and kids getting antsy and bored. And being a father of 3 myself, I completely understand. But like I said, we're just very grateful for the parents' patience with us.
Yeah, and I can't speak for all the parents, but for the parents in this household, for my wife and I, we've been extremely impressed with everything from the top down to the bottom, and the bottom back up again. Whether it's instructional aids or communications directly from you and the diocese, I mean, it's been exactly what you expect. And as you know, and I've kind of mentioned this before on these broadcasts, is I don't send my kids to Catholic school to say I send my kids to Catholic school. I send it for exactly what you're talking about, is that faith component. I want my kids learning the same faith that they have at home, getting those same values through their education and through the instruction. And it's been top notch. It hasn't missed a beat. And when there has been a hiccup, the teachers have been like, hey, you know what? We're working through this too. And everybody's been so patient. And we've had so many opportunities for our kids to Zoom or whatever platform, they're using Zoom. So to Zoom, we've Zoomed with the teachers. It's been a great thing. So again, I really commend you on that. But you mentioned something, and I think this is an interesting thing: is that you are a parent yourself. You have three kids. They're in school. How are you adapting to that yourself at home? Not only because in many ways you have a bunch of different schools that have a bunch of different kids that are looking at you at one point right now too, right? And three kids of your own. How is that working for you and your wife? How's home life going with all this? And maybe as a parent, what are your suggestions on doing things working with the kids?
It's funny, I've been telling teachers and principals and other parents that, I have a son. I have a son who is amazing at distance learning, and I have three sons. So we understand this is a real moving target for a lot of us. Is what does success actually look like? My youngest son is not a natural, putting it gracefully, at distance learning. He needs help getting organized. He's easily distracted. It's taken a real adjustment for him and his, God bless his 9-year-old soul, in adjusting to this new world. My 12-year-old he's like a duck in the water, right? He's just swimming. He's doing great. So I think it's given me a lot of empathy, a lot of sympathy for parents, understanding that, look, we can't expect miracles all the time, every day. We have to make sure that we're really meeting the families where they're at. And even within a family, where we're at with one son is very different than where we're at with another son. And because Aga, and I'm very blessed to have a spouse who is at home with the kids, she's able to give Cornell attention to try to get him through the day. But because my middle son doesn't need the help, we kind of take that for granted. So, like I said, I'm living the balancing act myself, and seeing it in action really has helped me understand, again, what are our objectives? What are we trying to get out of this year? And we're trying to do everything we can. That doesn't mean we're doing the impossible, or we're going to push families any farther than they can be pushed. On top of everything else, we know that families have to be able to get through this time together, and we don't want our expectations to be coming at the expense of family harmony or family unity. So I think that we're trying to really approach this with a generous spirit in working with our families. We know that not every kid's going to get every assignment every time, and that's okay.
For sure. You mentioned it earlier that the teachers and the staff are ministers first, and you probably would agree with me. Just like parents, as a parent, I'm my child's first educator. I'm also my child's first minister. I mean, I'm the one that's leading them not only in their educational path, but also in their faith path. And I think we can take a lot of cues from what the diocese has done. And we can take a lot of cues from yourself and the teachers and the principals. They often are displaying a lot of faith that we miss during a normal day of moving along and doing things. But I really think that can be something said. On a faith point of view, I mean, I see you're in your office now. You're probably not there every day, though you're probably there a lot because of everything that's going on. How are things progressing at the diocese right now? I'm sure it's a lot, not as busy as normal, but how is that going on? And I'm sure you're getting a ton of support from other staff members. But what's the feel there? How is the faith growing even stronger at this moment in time? Because you mentioned earlier that you were fortunate enough to be in a place with people at one time, and I personally think that was God's work, right? I mean, God made sure that you guys were there at specific times to make sure this all happened, and we're seeing the fruit of that labor. But I mean, how are things going over there, and what can we, as the faithful, the Catholic faithful, and those who are parents who send our kids to Catholic schools do to help the diocese and help the schools, and maybe help those other parents that aren't necessarily, or who are struggling during these times, both financially and mentally, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, just kind of overall.
Sure. It's interesting. We talked about this. A lot of folks in the office that, working for the church, we spend a lot of time in church. And it was a very odd feeling, I think, for all of us to not be there for Easter Mass in person. You know, it was, there's so much energy around those first 6 weeks of this transition to distance learning. And for the parishes transitioning to distance sacraments, I mean, that's an entirely different challenge for them. It's we can deliver authentic instruction via Zoom, but you can't receive the body and blood via Zoom directly, though you can observe it. And so, we very much tried to see the grace in being called to a new awareness of the presence of Christ in our lives because we're unable to go directly to church. It's for us at the main office right now, emails are going around. What is it going to look like when we're able to come back? I think that now that we know that we've made a decision that the schools and the churches are in distance mode through the end of May at the earliest, it did give us a little bit of space to start being really intentional about what it looks like when we come back. And so we're working on protocols for the parishes, which I've been lucky enough to see, and then working on ones for the schools at the same time. So I'm collaborating with my colleagues here on the churches in the actual sacramental side of things to make sure that we're going to have a coordinated approach to returning. We want to be back in community as soon as it's safe, and we want to do it in a really elegant way. And we know that there's going to be things like baccalaureate masses for the kids that couldn't have their graduation on time, celebrating the sacraments, especially the sacraments of initiation, like First Communion and confirmation for kids that weren't able to get that when it was scheduled. We also know that we're going to probably have some sort of social distancing protocols in place when we do come back. We may not be able to sit right next to each other. Or when we come back to school, we may have to plan on kids eating their lunch in the room and sitting in rows with plenty of space and having staggered recesses. So right now we're looking forward to that time when we can be back together, and just want to have real clear guidance for everybody about, yes, we're coming back together. Yes, we're still doing everything we can to make sure we're slowing the progress of this terrible disease.
Yeah, and again, I think you guys have done a great job, and it's great to hear the proactive approach, right? We see it all over the news, the public school districts, and how everything's been reactive. And I think that's one of the positive things about sending your kids to Catholic school is not only you're getting all that faith that we just talked about, but the proactivity of actually educating the child is there. It's not like you guys are just teaching them to take a test and pass it to move on to the next level. You're teaching, though, as I hear all the time, the whole child, from the mind, the heart, to the soul of the child, and it's just an amazing thing. And you guys are really, I just can't say it enough how much of a great job that you've done. And we see all the time, all these things that are going on with families that are struggling, right? And I know that the diocese is really great about helping families, and there's tons of resources available through the diocese for families, not necessarily with kids going to Catholic schools, but just people who are parishioners, who are Catholics, or just struggling in life. And I know the diocese has a great webpage with a ton of resources. For people who maybe are watching this that don't send their kids to Catholic school, I would suggest looking at Catholic schools. There's a ton of great ones throughout here. And honestly, for most people, the tuition is affordable, and there's opportunities in places as well. But what are some of those resources that you can give that maybe help parents during this period of time who are struggling, that need that faith that they may have lost touch with, that they can go on and get to help educate their children right now with the faith and really bring that back into their family? Because that's a big part of Catholic school, is bringing faith into education. And then what really grows it is continuing that faith at home, or actually, as I mentioned earlier, having that faith at home first, following up with it at school, and then really bringing it back at home. Do you know of it? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but do you have any resources, or are there resources on the diocesan page that people can find to kind of bring that into their life right now?
There are. So we did a really nice little program for Holy Week where we had, and then the week after Easter, which we've just come back from, we wanted to make sure that families had plenty of activities that were fun family activities and faith-centered for that week after Easter, knowing a lot of families had perhaps had to cancel their Easter vacations. So if you go on the diocesan website, we have links to all pages that do have resources for family activities. My colleagues in faith formation, which is for public school students, they have resources on their pages as well for families with kids, especially that are faith-centered and about that piece of a child's education. For families that have perhaps financial concerns or have physical needs that need to be met, the Sacramento Food Bank is a Catholic ministry, and so we're very proud of the work of the food bank and what they've been able to do to keep people whole physically. I just read that at St. John Vianney, we have the Rancho Cordova Food Bank there at SJV. They've tripled the number of people that they're serving right now. So we know that the church is really working very hard to support families that are suddenly financially challenged through no fault of their own. Actually, Governor Newsom, when he mobilized the National Guard, he sent 550 National Guards people to work for the Sacramento Food Bank. So I think that's a real sign of just how many lives those ministries touch. The church is very proud of its legacy of social support and spiritual support. And I think that if you go on the diocesan website, we have a COVID-19 resources button. So families would just need to go to scd.org and then click on that button. And we have all sorts of resources available for the Sacramento community.
Again, wonderful resource. The diocese has done a great job, as have the schools. And we were talking earlier, and I kind of want to transition back to the schools a little bit, and I'm going to bring it up here in 1 second. But you guys put together a video.
We did.
And I'm actually going to see if I can bring it into the screen here. You put together a video about Catholic schools and about where things are. And it's not a very long video. If you'll
yeah, please
go ahead.
I'm excited about this.
School is in session.
They knew that there was a job that had to be done. They care about their students, and we just got rolling with it.
So I can ask questions via email, Google Classrooms. I can ask my classmates, so we can see each other through these little Brady Bunch boxes.
Seeing through my kids how quickly we can adapt.
So today we're going to color the cover. We're there to pray together and be together as like a whole, and it was just like, okay, everything's going to be okay.
Having that consistency there has been fantastic for her.
I like doing the Google Meets with my classmates.
I like that our teacher's getting us ready for when we get into 3rd grade.
They're continuing their education, trying to keep it as normal and base. We really need to commend the faculty for doing that.
They're doing amazing things online.
And one of the things that I've definitely learned about distance learning through reading all these stories is it takes a lot of work, but that's what love does, right? Love works, puts in effort. So wonderful to see these teachers and these parents loving in this way.
Every email from a parent has been like, thank you so much. Like, we appreciate so much like what you're doing for our kids.
We have great leaders, a great parent community, which really helped us get through all this as a staff, as a school.
Within the diocese, there's a lot of sharing of ideas.
I know this time may be difficult for families, for teachers, for administrators. Just want to encourage you and remind you that with God, all things are possible. As priests, we're praying for you. Our communities are praying for you, and know that there is light at the end, that it'll break through the darkness of whatever we're going through. We'll all celebrate well when we come back together.
Thanks for helping us with this.
So great video. You guys probably turned that around pretty quickly, just as you've turned everything else around pretty quickly. And I guess my point for bringing that in is to show that, it's not just me or you like saying this. There's a lot of other families that are sending their kids to Catholic schools that are saying this. What can we expect as parents of Catholic school students over the next 4 or 5 weeks of school to keep the I heard this term earlier today, the BC, before COVID, way of life kind of moving along right now that we're dealing with the distant remote learning and that type of stuff. What can we expect to see over the next few weeks that maybe just diocesan-wide? I get every school is going to have their own approach to things, but diocesan-wide, what can we expect to see? I know that you've been great communicating, and I'm assuming we're probably going to get more communications from you about how the future looks, but some in generalized, what can you let parents know that they're going to be seeing over the next few weeks?
We're really looking forward to a strong wrap up to the year. So I was just online with the principals this morning, confirming how we're going to do grades and assessment through the end of the year. We have an end of the year checklist to make sure we're covering everything we need to. We are making sure that we're really managing two goals. Is one, to make sure that kids are on track in the really core areas of their education, in particular math and English language arts, and coming up with ways to assess it. And so we know that a letter grade may not be possible in every subject the way it was last trimester, and that's okay. What we're really looking for is honing in on those critical concepts and making sure that the kids understand those. The goal is to be affirmational and supportive and not punitive. Again, we know that every family has different capacity. Again, our goal is in a really objective way, make sure that every child is met standard in those key areas. So on top of that, though, we want to make sure, again, that we are doing everything we can to give the families resources and support while they're moving toward the end of the year. We're going to be missing out on a lot of our end of the year in-person celebrations. Most schools will have a field day, we'll have our graduation ceremonies. We're going to be looking for ways to really acknowledge the kids and do things like that. I mean, so all of our schools right now are planning their promotion ceremonies for next year as clusters. We have our principals are divided into these 6 groups of 6. And so their homework this week is to come up with what our end of the year program is going to look like, geography by geography. So our schools will be on the same page there. And really a lot of the ideas we've gotten back are very creative. On top of that, we're just trying to do a lot to acknowledge parents. I was very proud of this, but even at my own kids' school, I had a wonderful little poster posted on my front door this past weekend by the school principal telling the kids how glad she's going to be to have them back in school for the last 5 weeks. So we're trying to do a lot to acknowledge and affirm. Hospitality is very, very, very important to us. And we know that looks different when you're doing distance learning rather than being in person. But really that spirit of hospitality is what we're shooting for this last month.
Yeah, I saw that. As you know, I know Amy, and I saw that she had gone around. In fact, I've spoken with her, and she said that she went around to every single family's house and posted that on the door.
She did.
And that's an amazing thing. I think we're seeing just how amazing some of these principals and teachers are with the things that they're doing to engage and bring in families and the students. Because honestly, when you send your kids to a Catholic school, it's not like a public school where it's just a place where your kids go to school. It's a family that you join. And just like families, you have happy days and sad days, but they're always there to support you no matter what. I cannot say how much how blessing Catholic school is. With that, I also want to know that, I want to be cognizant of your time, right? I know you have a lot of things going on. I would love to give you the opportunity right now to kind of promote why if people are thinking about sending their kids to Catholic school, they should. Because I know right now a lot of people start looking at that, right? And there are, 30 plus?
Over 36 elementary schools. And then we've got a total of 44 schools in the Diocese of Sacramento.
So, there's a lot of schools. There's an opportunity for everybody. I give a testimony every time I talk to people about it. It's just such an amazing thing. The Catholic schools are. It's worth the sacrifice in my opinion, the financial sacrifice to send my kids to school there. But as the superintendent, what would you tell people why they should send their kids to Catholic schools? And as a parent of Catholic school students too.
The reason I'm happy to pay the tuition myself as a parent, for me, is that notion of forming servant leaders in Christ. I mean, to what end do we have Catholic schools in the first place? There are excellent public schools, charter schools, private schools, but the reason we have Catholic schools is we really do believe in that whole notion of servant leadership. And so we do promote excellence, and we believe that to be moral excellence and virtue. I mean, we're teaching a virtues curriculum that really, for me, is the most exciting part of the curriculum. We have academic excellence, and that's a foregone conclusion that we have to have both. But for me, it's the notion that you can just teach a child directly that God loves you so much, he's going to ask you to do something for someone else, and teach that with sincerity and conviction, and not mask it or hide it, but just be able to form a child in that openly, for me, is a tremendous gift. You know, not every country has this legacy of Catholic education like we do, but when you look at servant leaders and people in the community that are engaged in leading, a lot of them have gone through Catholic schools. And I think part of the reason for that is that we are just completely unapologetic about focusing on that notion of forming servant leaders in Christ, about doing something for someone else. And so we're very, very proud of that tradition, and I'm very humbled to be engaged in it.
Yeah, and it truly, again, I can only say this from my perspective, but it truly is a blessing to be a part of. And, you know, you and I have gotten to know each other, and I know that Lincoln is definitely that way. He is always looking out for the best interest of the students and what serves the schools and the kids and the parents and the teachers best. And I've seen that over the years, and I cannot say how wonderful of a leader and a servant leader that you've been during this, you know, this whole COVID-19 thing. I don't know if you've ever read the book, Leaders Eat Last.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, that's, if people out there are kind of wondering what a servant leader is, pick up the book, Leaders Eat Last. That'll tell you about servant leadership right there. And it even touches on the Christ-based kind of servant leadership that Lincoln was just talking about. It's a very easy read, probably take you maybe a half a day, 2 days to get through. If you can actually sit down and do it. It took me like 6 weeks because my kids kept interrupting me when I was reading, or I would fall asleep in bed reading the book. But great book, really talks about that servant leadership and, you know, really following through that. And you see it when you send your kids to Catholic school, you really see that, or at least here in the Diocese of Sacramento, how they're always looking out. They're getting that ingrained in them, looking at what to do for others, right? It's about, you know, at OLG, we say only our best, love from the heart, gospel values. And really, my kids really focus on those different things and that type of stuff. And it's been great. You know, it's great to hear what the diocese has been doing, to see how proactive you've been with things, to hear that, you know, the principals are starting to come together with a plan to celebrate the students when a lot of them should be being would normally be celebrating right now, right? Like next Sunday, this coming Sunday would have been First Communion for a whole bunch of first graders, or second graders, including my middle son would have had his First Communion. And my oldest son was looking so forward to it because he was going to be an altar server while his brother was going to get his First Communion. So it's really changed the world that we live in. But, you know, we still see these great things. We hear from the school and from the parish about what their plans are for these things and how they're fluid and they're trying to be as agile as possible. But it's great. Just throwing this out there, weird question, but I saw over the weekend that the Air Force Academy, I don't know if you saw this, had their graduation ceremony. And the vice president spoke at it. And they did a very, very interesting concept. They took their entire football field to put their graduating class on it. And I think they had 2 chairs distance between each cadet, both forward and backward and side to side. And then they had the graduation ceremony. Has that been a discussion at all with either the high schools or the elementary schools moving forward? I know it'd be hard with the younger kids, right? But have you guys thought about doing anything like that, or to celebrate the students on potentially their what would be their graduation day?
It's funny you mentioned that. We just discussed that at one of our school's board meetings last night for one of our high schools, and I won't name which one, but the concern came up is, you know, cadets at the Air Force Academy have been trained to be disciplined and keep rank and file. And we said at this school, we can't imagine our kids not hugging each other at graduation. So I think that we made the decision actually to do an online event, but that we're planning on having everybody together as soon as it's reasonably safe to do so. We do have, I hate to say it, but the kids won't be able to go off to college until it's safe for everybody to come back. And so we do know we'll have that window where everybody will be able to be together, God willing. And so we're looking forward to that day. But in the meantime, we're going to do what we can to acknowledge the kids.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good thing that a lot of people aren't thinking about. I mean, a week and a half ago, I spoke with a priest friend of ours who's actually in Rome right now. He is a theology professor at St. Mary's College, a Diocese of Stockton priest. And he was talking about how he's been in conversations with the school. They don't know what's happening, when they're going to be allowed to actually have instruction again. What advice do you have, I guess, and I'm going to let you go soon because I know you have other things to get done, but what advice do you have for the parents of high school students who are graduating, who've been accepted to colleges, who are kind of, or waiting to hear back because they fell into this weird space that COVID-19 happened right around the time that letters were being sent out, and some of those letters haven't been sent out because they don't know what's going to do. I mean, how do they stay the course during this, what would normally be a stressful time anyways, waiting to find out if you got into that school? What would your thoughts be right now? And maybe has it caused a delay in admissions to the high schools? The COVID-19, has it caused a delay into any admissions for high schools in the diocese?
And it hasn't. The thing I tell parents is, just kind of seeing these kinds of decisions from the inside out. Right now, nationally, there's 124,000 schools that aren't in session. So it's very unnerving for you as the parent of an 8th grader or of a 12th grader waiting on that acceptance letter of finding out what happens next. Because, we all understand that these are times of transition for our kids and we want to support them and get them on to the next thing. I just say, please be patient. The fact that you haven't heard back doesn't mean that there's anything wrong in your particular circumstance. This is a global problem and everybody's going through it together. So I would just counsel patience. I truly believe this, that all of the superintendents and school leaders I talk to, they've had to hit the pause button on a few things. We don't know exactly when we can come back. We're starting to imagine what that could look like. And we'll be communicating that out as best as we can. But truly, when some of these school leaders are saying, we have to wait, we're not sure yet. All I can advocate is the principle of charity. That's a true statement. They're doing everything they can because they want your child with them in their school for sure. It's just going to take them a while to make sure it's safe to do that. So all I can counsel is good old fashioned stoicism.
Yeah. Well, it's being patient is a virtue that I think we're all really having to lean upon and learn how to have at this moment in time, right? We tell our kids all the time, patience is a virtue, especially when they want an answer from us that we don't know how to give the answer. So I think maybe as a parent, when we're wanting something, we need to exercise the virtue that we try to have our children exercise all the time, right? It goes back to somewhat that servant leadership, right? You got to lead by example. Well, hey, Lincoln, I want to be I'm really appreciative, one, and I want to be cognizant of your time. Two, is there anything else that you would like to make sure that gets out there on behalf of the Catholic schools, or that Catholic school parent you think that a Catholic school parent really needs to hear right now?
I'll come back to the tagline of our little ad we put together. School is in session. I'm just so honored, humbled, graced by the fact that I'm working with a team of people that when it was time for us to jump on behalf of our kids and our families, everybody jumped, and we were able to make it happen because of that. So really, my parting thought is one of gratitude. We're grateful for every family that we have in our schools, and we're grateful for the people that make it all possible.
Well, and we're definitely grateful from the parents that I've spoken with and chatted with. We're very grateful for the schools and the leadership that's come from the diocese. Again, you guys have done an amazing job. Big round of applause and kudos to all of you. Keep up the diligent work. Keep doing everything that you guys have been doing. And I really, really really appreciate not only the support that you've given to the faculty and some of that, but to the students and to the families, and then also for your time today. So I really want to thank you again, Lincoln. It's great seeing you. Unfortunately, it's been a few months since we've actually run into each other somewhere, but I'm sure we'll once this is all over, we'll get together soon. Instead of having that virtual cup of coffee, we'll actually have a cup of coffee again.
Well, luckily, every time my sons put on their uniform shirts and I look at that redesigned branding, I get to think of you. So thanks for all you do.
There you go. I'm glad that was such a hit. You guys have a great school there. You're blessed to have such a wonderful principal. I can't say enough about Amy, and Dawn is a great supporter of hers too. They're a great couple, and so you guys are really lucky to have them. So
absolutely.
Anyways, thank you again so much, and you have a wonderful day. And I hope your family is staying well during all this, and continues to stay well and be blessed. So,
yeah, we're very everybody's healthy, so no complaints on my end. Thank you, Michael, and it's been great being on the show. Thank you for your time and taking the time to ask the questions, and thank you for all you do for our schools.
Well, thank you, Lincoln. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.